My name is Maris. At my sister's birthday, my mother told me to sit outside. Family only, she said, right as they took the photo. I smiled like it didn't hurt, but something in me broke. That night, I didn't cry. I walked away. And, for once, I didn't ask if it was okay. Please listen to the whole story. Then tell me, did I do the right thing? Would you have stayed or walked away too? I need to know. It was a little chilly that day, not cold enough for a heavy coat, just that kind of crisp air that makes you notice your breath. I remember it clearly, like it's been playing on a loop in the back of my mind ever since. I was walking up the front steps of the house I grew up in, the same old red tile roof, the creaky porch swing still hanging to the left, though it hadn't been used in years. The neighborhood looked the same, but the house, it felt smaller somehow. Or maybe I had just gotten older. I carried a box of lemon bars I'd stayed up late baking, wrapped neatly in parchment paper, tied with twine. They were Sierra's favorite. At least they used to be. Inside, it was already busy. Laughter, clinking glasses, someone shouting for more napkins. My mother was in the center of it all, giving directions like a seasoned conductor. I stepped through the door, and she barely glanced up. No hug, no, I'm glad you're here. Just a quick flick of her eyes toward the hallway. You can leave your things by the laundry sink, but don't block the path. We've got guests coming in and out. I nodded. That was our usual rhythm. Me arriving quietly, her managing everything. I was used to not making a scene. A few minutes later, I asked if she needed help setting the table. Her hands were full of cocktail glasses, but she shook her head. No, Sierra and her friends can handle that. They've got the vibe. Just maybe stay out of the way a little. Don't want it to get too cramped in there. I smiled. It wasn't a real smile, more like the kind you give when someone hands you a gift you didn't ask for. I told myself not to take it personally. I'd gotten pretty good at that over the years, talking myself out of how I really felt. The house filled up fast. People I hadn't seen in ages arrived with gifts and wine bottles and air kisses. I stood off to the side, nodding and smiling, waiting for someone to notice me in the way you want to be noticed, not just as background noise. Then came the introductions. Mom stood near the buffet line, pointing people out like she was narrating a slideshow. This is Sierra, of course, birthday girl. And that's Uncle Rick from Portland. Over there's the couple from church, and that's Sierra's sister, the one who baked yesterday. She didn't use my name. Not once. Sierra's sister. The one who baked. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, pretending I was busy refolding a napkin that didn't need folding. I thought maybe I was being dramatic, but deep down, something tightened in my chest. It wasn't about pride. It was about being invisible in the place I was supposed to be most seen. I kept watching people flow around me like a stream parting around a rock. Nobody was cruel. Nobody said anything mean. That's what made it so hard to explain, to myself, to anyone else. It's easier to talk about pain when it has sharp edges. This one was smooth, constant, the kind you only notice when you sit with it long enough. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, throwing long shadows across the backyard. I slipped out the sliding door with my box of lemon bars. I sat on the old wooden bench near the rose bush that never bloomed right, unwrapped the box slowly, one corner at a time. Through the glass, I could see them all, my family, laughing around the dining table. Flash from a camera lit up the room like a tiny firework. I thought I saw Sierra raise a glass. Someone else leaned in to kiss her cheek. No one noticed I wasn't in there. I picked up a lemon bar, took a bite. The crust was perfect, just enough crumble, the filling tangy but sweet. I chewed slowly, quietly, as if it might taste different than usual. It didn't. I still remember the taste of that lemon bar. No one at the party ever tried one. The thing about going back home is that it doesn't start with the front door, it starts with the way you shrink. You don't even notice it at first. You're just trying to help. Be useful. Say yes. Smile when you're expected to. And then suddenly, you're back in that same invisible corner you spent years trying to step out of. This wasn't my first return. I'd done this dance for birthdays, Thanksgiving, baby showers, even a retirement party for an uncle who barely remembered my name. There's always some reason you should go. Some unspoken debt you feel obligated to repay. And every time, I'd find myself doing the things no one remembered afterward. Clearing plates, wrapping leftovers, fixing the loose vase on the coffee table so it didn't tip when someone passed too close. There's a photo on Mom's fridge from Sierra's 28th. She's mid-laugh, surrounded by friends, her boyfriend's arm around her waist, candles flickering. I remember that night. I baked the cake. I lit those candles. I passed it to Mom, then stepped back so Sierra could be front and center. "Let your sister have her moment," Mom said, brushing my shoulder like I'd been in the way. "You're older. You understand." I did understand. That was the problem. I always did. Out in the backyard, with the lemon bars untouched beside me, my phone buzzed in the pocket of my cardigan. I pulled it out, thumbed the screen. "Tanya, hope you made it in okay. Don't worry about your shift tomorrow if you need space. Just let me know." It was a simple message, but it hit like a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Kindness feels like that sometimes, like a light in the fog when you've grown too used to the dark. Still, I locked the screen and put it away. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to admit I needed checking on. 3 days earlier, I'd been standing in the back room at Honeywell and Vine, dusted in flour, half watching cinnamon rolls rise while pretending I wasn't thinking about going home. Tanya was wiping down the espresso machine when she looked up and asked, "You okay?" I gave her a shrug, the kind that's supposed to mean don't worry about it, I'm fine, even when you're clearly not. "Just debating this party," I said. "Family stuff." She nodded without pushing. Then she said, "Sometimes family's a bigger circle than we were taught." Back then, I didn't fully get it. But now, sitting outside under string lights and mosquito buzz, I started to feel what she meant. Later that night, I wandered inside while most of the guests were laughing by the grill. I figured I'd bring out the lemon bars. Maybe someone wanted dessert. Maybe I just wanted to feel useful, like I had something to offer. As I turned toward the patio, a tall woman in a sundress stopped me. She had perfect hair, long lashes, the kind of soft confidence that comes from always knowing you belong. She smiled politely at the box in my hands. "Oh, are you the one who delivered these? They look amazing. Did Sierra order them from that cute place in Midtown?" I froze for a split second. "No," I said. "I made them." Her eyebrows lifted. "Oh. Well, they look really professional." Then she walked off, leaving the air behind her too still, like something unfinished had been said and no one noticed. I stood there, alone in the kitchen. The lemon bars felt heavy in my hands. Not because of the tray, but because of what wasn't in them anymore. Excitement, pride, effort. All of it had gone cold. I thought about saying, "I'm Sierra's sister." I almost did. But it caught in my throat, like the words didn't belong to me. Like maybe they never really had. Because the truth is, even if I had said it, it wouldn't have mattered. The story had already been told, and I wasn't written into it. The characters were set. The spotlight fixed. I was just a stand-in they didn't notice had arrived. So, I placed the lemon bars on the drink table. Quietly. Without fuss. Then I returned to the bench, watched the sky bruise into twilight, and wondered how something so small, a passing question from a stranger, could feel like it had shaken the foundation of everything I'd spent decades convincing myself was normal. That night, I stopped calling it overthinking, and I started calling it what it really was. Not bitterness, not envy, just the slow, aching weight of being erased. I should have known better when I chose that chair. It was tucked near the kitchen door, angled slightly away from the living room, like it didn't want to be noticed, and maybe that's why I picked it. Safe. Out of the way. I wasn't trying to draw attention to myself. I just wanted to sit down and feel like I had a place. 5 minutes, maybe less, before I heard it. "You're sitting there? Can you move to the back patio, sweetheart? We're trying to keep the path clear for the family photo." She said it with a smile, voice light enough to sound polite, but just loud enough for others to hear. That mix, pleasant and dismissive all at once, was something my mother had perfected over the years. Sweetheart. When she said it, it didn't sound like endearment. It felt like punctuation. A way to soften the push. I stood up like it didn't matter. Like it didn't sting to be asked to move, to clear the way for something I was no longer part of. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't catch. But inside, something folded in on itself, quiet and invisible. I slipped through the sliding door into the backyard. The evening air had cooled, settling over the grass like a blanket no one asked for. I sat down at the patio table, next to a tray of half-eaten sliders and an abandoned soda can. Everything around me looked used, picked through, forgotten. I folded my hands in my lap and stared through the glass. Inside, the room was buzzing. Voices overlapping, glasses clinking, camera flashes sparking like tiny stars. I could see Sierra in the middle of it all, smiling wide, her hair curled just right, wearing that effortless charm she was always praised for. Mom stood beside her, adjusting someone's collar, brushing crumbs off a shoulder, looking completely in control. People leaned in around them, drawn to the center, drawn to warmth. And I just watched. It wasn't the exile itself that hurt. I'm used to silence. I've never needed to be the center of attention. But there's a difference between choosing to be alone and being asked to disappear. That difference settled heavy in my chest, pressing against old bruises I didn't even know were still sore. Then I heard Sierra's voice through the crack of the sliding door.
Mom.
Come on, get in here. Everyone's here now. Judith, my mother, walked past the door. She didn't glance outside. Didn't pause. All right. Family only, please. Family only. She said it like it was a joke. Like it was just a light-hearted boundary to keep the crowd down. But I heard it differently. I heard it as a gate swinging shut. A verdict passed. And maybe she didn't know I was within earshot. But I was. And something inside me, something small but essential, snapped clean in two. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. I just sat there, very still, while the laughter inside crescendoed and the shutter clicks kept counting moments I wasn't allowed into. I glanced down and noticed a loose thread at the hem of my dress. I started twisting it around my finger, not to fidget, but to feel something grounded. Something that belonged to me. It was such a tiny thing. But somehow it was all I could see. Family only. I've always known Sierra was the favorite. She was easier to love, bubbly, eager, never too complicated. She followed the rules, fit the image, said what people wanted to hear. I was quieter. I needed space. I asked hard questions. I made people uncomfortable, without meaning to. I didn't cook to impress. I cooked to breathe. And in this family, breathing on your own always felt like rebellion. What cut deepest wasn't that they left me out. It was that no one seemed surprised I wasn't included. I started thinking about all the little moments I used to overlook. The birthdays with no call. The text sent hours too late. The way Mom always introduced me to her friends as the one who bakes, never by name. 3 years ago, on my birthday, I made myself a cake, small, one layer, nothing fancy. I lit a candle and sat at my kitchen table, waiting. My phone didn't ring. No card in the mail. Just a text at 9:32 p.m. Happy birthday. Hope it was a good one. I told myself she must have been busy. That something came up. That maybe she forgot for a few hours, but it wasn't intentional. But now, watching her laugh with her arm around Sierra, watching the camera flash again and again, I knew better. She didn't forget. She just didn't think it mattered enough to pause whatever she was doing. And that realization didn't burn like fire. It settled like frost. Quiet.
Slow. Cold.
I closed my eyes and listened. People were laughing again, toasting something else. Maybe the perfect shot. Maybe the perfect family. I reached for the box of lemon bars beside me, peeled back the wax paper, and stared at the neatly arranged rows. I'd baked them with care. Poured my time and heart into them, the way I always did. But no one had touched them. That's when it hit me. All I ever wanted was to be in the picture. Not front and center. Not even smiling. Just in it.
It was getting quiet by then.
The music had faded to a soft hum inside, and most of the guests had said their goodbyes, their voices trailing off into the front yard as car doors shut and engines started. The patio lights stayed on, casting long shadows across the wooden deck. I sat in the same spot I'd been in most of the night, hands folded on my lap like I was waiting for something I couldn't quite name. The sliding door creaked open. My mother stepped out, holding a plastic container with a red lid. She didn't sit down, just hovered near the edge of the door like she didn't really plan to stay long. "I put some of the birthday cake in here for you," she said, placing the container on the table beside me. "You should eat something before you go. And when you're done, can you clear off the patio table for me? It's starting to look messy out here." I looked at the cake for a long moment. It was barely touched, only the corner piece missing, like no one had really wanted it. She hadn't asked how I was. Not once the entire night. And now, with everyone gone, this half-eaten cake and a request to clean up, that was my part. I turned to her slowly and asked, "Mom, do you ever see me as part of this family?" She blinked, caught off guard. For a second, it looked like she might laugh it off. But she didn't. "What kind of question is that?" she said, smoothing her shirt. "Of course you're part of the family. You're just different. You've always been a little more sensitive than the rest of us." There it was. The word. Sensitive. I'd heard it my whole life, always used like a warning label. It was what she said when I cried at unfair things, when I stood up for myself, when I dared to say that something didn't feel right. "No," I said quietly. "I'm not being sensitive. I'm being clear." She looked away, out toward the fence line like the answer might be hiding in the dark. "I think you're reading too much into things. You always do." I nodded, but I didn't back down. Not this time. All night long, I waited for you to say my name. Just once. To say, "This is my daughter." Not the one who bakes, or the older one. Just my name. Her jaw shifted slightly. That was the closest thing to guilt I'd seen on her face in years. "I didn't mean to hurt your feelings," she offered. "But you did," I said. "And you keep doing it. And I keep letting you." Silence stretched between us like an old rope, frayed at both ends. I wasn't angry. I was tired. Tired of pretending crumbs were a meal. Tired of swallowing pain and calling it maturity. Tired of mistaking quiet for peace. I don't think she knew what to say. She folded her arms, like she was cold, and glanced at the door behind her. I thought about every moment I'd excused like it was nothing. Every time I'd told myself, "This is just how she is." Every moment I'd watched her wrap her arms around Sierra like the sun rose just for her, and then turn to me like I was a fixture in the house, not a person. I thought about the birthdays I spent alone. The holidays I only got texts. The way she used to say, "You know I love you, right?" Right after asking why I couldn't be more like my sister. I didn't say all that. I didn't need to. Instead, I stood up and picked up the cake container. I didn't open it. I didn't even look inside. "I'm gonna go," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You're not staying the night?" she asked, like we hadn't spent the whole evening not speaking unless it was about logistics. "No," I replied. "And for once, I'm not asking if that's okay." I walked past her, back through the yard and toward the side gate. My feet felt light. Not in a happy way, just unburdened. When I reached the street, I looked back once. The house stood still under the yellow porch light, quiet again, like it had swallowed its own noise. I used to think love meant staying.
Swallowing.
Adjusting. I used to call that sacrifice. Now I call it something else. Survival. And I chose not to survive her. I chose myself. The motel room was small, barely wider than the bed, with walls the color of unbuttered toast, and a window that looked out onto a parking lot lit by flickering fluorescent lights. Still, I'd chosen it. 5 blocks from my mother's house, close enough to be polite, far enough to breathe. I could have stayed in the guest room, the one that used to be mine, back when I was 17, and thought love was something you earned by staying quiet. But that room had been swallowed whole by boxes of plastic wreaths and out-of-season snowmen. No space for me. Not anymore. I placed the container of cake on the desk near the window. The red frosting had pressed against the lid, leaving a sticky, uneven smear across the plastic. I hadn't looked inside. I didn't want to. I sat down on the edge of the bed, my knees stiff, my shoes still on. The silence in that room felt unnatural, like it had been vacuum sealed. Nothing echoed. Nothing gave. I used to think that was love. I whispered, more to the air than to myself. Now I think it's indifference dressed up as tradition. I didn't say it with bitterness. Just clarity, like naming something after years of calling it the wrong thing. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through old messages. Mom's name popped up here and there, but never without instruction. Don't forget to wish Sierra luck today. If you come to dinner, please don't bring up your therapy. You know how Aunt Marie gets. Can you tone down the work stuff? It's not really something your cousins get. Translation: shrink yourself, make everyone else comfortable, and for God's sake, don't be complicated. I couldn't remember the last time she asked how I was. Not beyond the casual. Work still busy? Or you seeing anyone? The last time I tried to tell her I was overwhelmed, she said, "You've always been sensitive." When I mentioned feeling stuck, she said, "Other people have it worse." When I brought up feeling small, she said, "You think too much. You always have." So eventually I stopped trying. I learned to wrap my pain in silence, to smile through resentment, to fold my needs into something less inconvenient. I shrank my presence, softened my voice, wore a version of myself that took up less room. And even now, even after walking out of that house and everything it stood for, I sat there wondering if I had made a mistake. Was I being dramatic? Was I the problem? That's what happens when you're conditioned to ask permission to exist. You keep asking, even when no one's there to deny you.
My phone rang.
The screen lit up with Tanya's name. I picked up, voice tight with the effort of sounding fine. "Hey, you okay?" she asked. No pleasantries.
Just straight to it.
"Define okay," I said, trying to laugh. It didn't land. A pause. "I wanted to tell you something," she said. "We had a woman come in today. Older. Maybe late 70s. She asked for you by name." I straightened. "Really?" "Yeah," she continued. "You sat with her last week when her coffee spilled. You remember?" I did. She had kind eyes and a cardigan covered in cat hair. She talked about her daughter for almost 30 minutes while I wiped the table and brought her a fresh drink. I didn't say much, just listened. "Well," Tanya said, she told me, "that girl made me feel like I wasn't a burden. Like what I said actually mattered." I swallowed hard, suddenly blinking faster than I wanted to. "She asked if you were someone's granddaughter," Tanya added, her voice softening. "She said you have an old soul." My hand went to my mouth, instinctively. Not from shock, but from that rare ache of being seen. Tanya waited a second before saying, "You matter, you know. Even when it feels like you don't. Especially then." I didn't say anything at first. My throat was too tight. Tears came, slow, steady. Not loud or gasping, just real. The kind of tears that had waited years for permission to be felt. "I needed that," I whispered eventually. "Thank you." The silence that followed was the kind that only exists between people who understand each other. No filler. No rush. I looked around the room again. Beige walls, wrinkled sheets, a humming mini fridge in the corner. But something inside me felt different. Lighter. It wasn't about being praised. It was about being witnessed. Not as someone useful. Not as the person who stayed quiet to make things easier. Just as me. And that was enough. Not perfect. Not loud. Not pleasing. Just present. Just real. I didn't make the decision on a wave of fury or heartbreak. It came slowly, like fog lifting off a field in the morning. Quiet.
Certain.
No music swelling, no cinematic moment. Just me, alone in a motel room, sipping lukewarm coffee, and realizing I didn't want to keep living a life I had to shrink to fit into. I let the decision sit in my chest for an entire day. Not because I doubted it, but because this was the first time I was making a choice that had nothing to do with what would make my mother proud, or what would make the rest of the family more comfortable. This one was mine. Fully mine. And it felt delicate. Like something I didn't want to drop before I fully believed it belonged to me. I called Tanya late the next morning from the tiny breakfast nook of the motel lobby. It smelled faintly of burnt toast and bleach. A man 2 tables over was on a Zoom call, his voice echoing. I wrapped both hands around my cup and let it steady me. The phone barely rang twice. "You up early," Tanya said, her voice warm like always. "I wanted to ask if the full-time position's still open," I said. "I want it. If it's still there." A pause followed, and I could hear something shift through the speaker. Relief, maybe. Maybe a quiet kind of hope. "It's yours," she said simply. "We were hoping you'd say that." I exhaled. A breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Thank you," I said, my voice smaller than I meant it to be. "And San Jose?" she asked gently. "I pulled my application this morning," I said. "I'm not going." That job, the one my mother had pushed me toward, was the smart move. The stable one. But it was also the version of me she kept trying to build. The polished, presentable, easily defined daughter. I wasn't her anymore. Maybe I never was. There was a beat of silence, then Tanya said, "Good. You belong here." And this time I believed her. I wasn't choosing the cafe because it was easy. I was choosing it because it was honest. Because when I walked through that door, flower on my jeans, apron around my waist, I wasn't performing anymore. I was real.
Seen.
Enough. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number, but I knew. Of course I knew. I stared at the screen for a second too long before answering. "Why'd you leave like that?" My mother's voice snapped before I could say hello. "You couldn't even stay to say goodbye?" People noticed. There it was. Not "Are you okay?" Not "Did something happen?" Just concern about appearances. "It wasn't about you, Mom," I said calmly, though my hand gripped the edge of the table. "I left because I didn't feel like I belonged." "Don't be dramatic," she said quickly. "You know how things get when the house is full. I was just trying to keep it organized." "No," I said. "You were keeping me out of the picture." "Literally." She scoffed. "You twist everything. I never said you weren't part of the family." "You didn't have to," I said. "I was sitting right outside the door when you said family only. You looked right past me. And that's not new. It's always been like that." There was a pause, longer this time. "You're reading into things again," she said finally, but her voice didn't sound so firm anymore. "Just tired." I took a breath. Not sharp. Not shaking. Just steady. "You know what, Mom? Maybe I am. But even if I am, shouldn't that still matter? Shouldn't it matter that I walked away feeling like I wasn't wanted?" She was quiet again. I imagined her in the kitchen, wiping down a spotless counter, frowning the way she did when something didn't go according to plan. "You always make it about you," she said under her breath. "I had a house full of people. I had things to manage." "I'm not angry you were busy," I said. "I'm hurt that I've never been anything more than what I could offer. I've always been the extra hands. Never the person who gets a seat saved." She let out a sharp sigh. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "What's not fair is being asked to fade into the background my whole life, and then being called selfish for finally walking away." This time, she didn't respond. Just silence. Heavy, like something had dropped between us, and neither of us wanted to name it. "I don't expect an apology," I said finally. "I'm not calling for that. I'm calling to say I'm done trying to prove I belong."
"You don't mean that," she said. Her voice was softer now.
Not broken. Just unsure.
"I do," I said.
"I'm not angry. I'm not trying to punish you. I'm just done." I hung up. I sat there for a moment, staring at the call log, her number still glowing faintly like a warning light I'd finally stopped running toward. And then I blocked it. Not because I hated her. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I needed space. Real space. The kind where I could hear myself think. The kind where I wasn't constantly rehearsing my lines or holding my breath, waiting to be allowed in. Outside the motel window, the sky had cleared. Crisp, late morning light filtering through the glass. And I didn't feel guilty for choosing peace. I felt steady. Present. Unapologetically whole. It was Sierra who texted me exactly 1 week after I left. "Mom's at Mercy General. They're checking her heart. Probably nothing, but I thought you should know. You might want to come." She's still our mom, you know? I stared at the message for a long time. Long enough for the screen to dim and my own reflection to appear. Blurry, uncertain. A month ago, I would have bolted out the door, guilt blooming like wildfire in my chest. But now I felt something quieter. Not cold. Not indifferent. Just calm. Still. It didn't feel like a crisis. It felt like a threshold. And I knew. This wasn't about her heart. Not the medical one, anyway. It was about mine. Whether I would keep shrinking to fit a version of family that never held space for me. Or whether I would stand firm in the new skin I was finally learning to live in. I got dressed slowly. No urgency. No shaking hands. I put on the same cardigan I wore the night I walked out of her house. The fabric had been washed since, but it still held something of that night. Something final. The hospital was like every hospital I'd ever been in. Pale walls, soft lighting that tried to be gentle but only made everything look more tired. The scent of antiseptic clung to every surface. Nurses moved efficiently, but without rushing. Monitors beeped steadily. Nothing felt dramatic. Just clinical. Unfeeling. I found her room, but didn't go in right away. I stood just outside the door, watching through the small glass panel. 15 minutes passed. Maybe more. I don't know what I was waiting for. Maybe to make sure I wasn't stepping back into the daughter I used to be. When I finally opened the door, it made a quiet sound, like a sigh. She was sitting up, remote in hand, flipping through channels with a glazed expression. Hospital blankets pulled up neatly around her waist. Her hair was pinned back, face bare, thinner than I remembered. She looked up. There was a flicker, surprise, maybe, but not enough to move her features.
She didn't speak.
Neither did I. The quiet between us felt different this time, not loaded with expectation or swallowed resentment. Just stillness. I reached into my tote and pulled out a clear plastic container. I set it gently on the tray table next to her. Lemon bars. Just like the ones from the party. Still untouched. I brought these a week ago, I said. My voice wasn't hard, but it wasn't soft either. No one ate them. Not a single one. She glanced at the container. Her hands stayed tucked under the blanket. She didn't reach for it. I didn't bring anything this time, I added. Because now I understand something I didn't before. She looked at me, then really looked, and she didn't try to steer the moment somewhere safer. I'm not here to yell, I said. Not to blame you. Not to ask you to feel bad. Her eyes stayed on mine. Her mouth opened slightly, like a thought nearly made it to the surface, but nothing came. I'm just here to tell you that I'm done waiting outside the door, hoping someone calls my name, hoping to be included. She blinked. A few times quickly. Her expression didn't change much, but something in her posture shifted, just barely. I used to think I had to earn my way into this family, I continued. By being helpful. By being agreeable. By being small. But I'm not small anymore. I stepped closer. Not out of anger. Just truth. If you want to be in my life now, you'll have to come find me in it. The real one. Not the version you made room for. There was no big reaction. No tears. No apology. Just the faintest softening in her jaw. A kind of quiet acknowledgement. And strangely, that was enough. I didn't need a speech. I didn't need a hug. I didn't need her to change overnight. I just needed to know that I'd said what needed saying, and that this time I hadn't swallowed it to keep the peace. I turned, slowly, and walked toward the door. No looking back. No second-guessing. For the first time in my life, I wasn't performing as the good daughter. I wasn't hoping someone would come after me and say, wait, stay. My steps were slow but certain, like each one was a choice. I didn't need her to choose me. I had already chosen myself, and it felt holy. Not loud, not righteous, just right. I used to think love had to be earned with silence, with sacrifice, with perfectly measured gestures that didn't make anyone uncomfortable. But now I know, peace isn't found in someone finally picking you. It's found in no longer needing to be picked. 2 months passed, quicker than I expected. Life didn't change in some dramatic, cinematic way. It just settled. Like flour finally sinking to the bottom of a bowl after too much stirring. Quiet even, but I think peace often is. I started working full-time at Honeywell and Vine. Early mornings became my rhythm. I'd unlock the door before the sun came up, start the first batch of muffins, hum under my breath as the espresso machine hissed and clicked to life. By 8 a.m., the regulars would roll in. Mr. Ruiz with his crossword and plain coffee. The Granger sisters, who never stopped bickering but always split a cinnamon roll. And the older woman with silver hair and a tote full of library books, who once told me I reminded her of her daughter. Only gentler. Some of them knew me by name now. Some came in just to ask what I was baking, and then stay to talk about things that didn't fit in polite conversation. Grief, children, regrets, the things we gave up to keep the people we loved close. I moved into a small apartment in Midtown with a woman named Denise. We weren't best friends, just two women who liked quiet and shared a soft spot for jazz and clean counters. My room was mine entirely, every book, every framed photo, every throw pillow. Nothing was handed down or borrowed. Every inch of where I lived had my fingerprint on it. One Sunday afternoon, Tanya invited the whole cafe staff over for tea. No reason, no birthday, no milestone. She just said, "I think people deserve to eat good cake even when there's no occasion." We sat out back under string lights, sipping from mismatched mugs and laughing about nothing in particular. At some point, one of the girls asked me, "Do you go home much?" I didn't hesitate. "I go home every day," I said, smiling gently. Home is where I finally get to be me. That was the truest thing I'd said in a long time. I hadn't heard from my mother since the hospital visit. No calls, no texts. But Sierra mentioned once, offhand, while picking up coffee, that Mom had started going to a support group. Something about parents of adult children, learning to reconnect without control. That was enough for me. I wasn't waiting for an apology. Not anymore. Some things don't need a resolution, they just need distance.
And silence.
It wasn't punishment. It was space. A breath I'd never been allowed to take while living in her orbit. One afternoon, a postcard showed up at the cafe. No return address. No long note. Just a sentence scribbled in loose cursive, probably with a hand that trembled a little. "You are kind. Don't let anyone wear that out of you. Don't let them name you anything less than whole." I recognized the handwriting. It was from the woman with the library tote, the one who remembered how I sat and listened without interrupting, how I handed her a napkin when she didn't ask, how I saw her. I pinned that postcard above my kitchen sink, next to the first apron I ever sewed by hand, back when I moved out, broke but determined, and didn't yet know what kind of life I deserved. Now, every morning when I reach for the kettle or rinse a mixing bowl, it's right there. A small reminder. Quiet but firm. I still bake. But now I bake for different reasons. Not to be praised or included or needed. Just because I love it. Because the smell of cinnamon makes my shoulders drop, and the heat from the oven makes my apartment feel like something is always rising. That week, I wrapped a fresh batch of snickerdoodles in wax paper. Not for a party. Not for a birthday. Not for anyone waiting. Just for the counter at the cafe. Just for myself. I tied the string, slow and careful, and whispered something I never thought I'd believe. I used to think I had to please people to be kept around. Now I know, anyone who really wants me won't ask me to stand outside just to prove I belong. Maybe you've been there too. On the outside of something that once felt like it should have been home. Maybe you've stayed quiet a little too long, hoping someone would notice without you having to ask. This story isn't about blame. It's about boundaries. And the quiet kind of courage it takes to stop performing just to be loved. If any part of this felt familiar, I hope you know you're not alone, and that your presence never has to be earned to be worthy. If this story stayed with you, I'd love to have you along next time too. There are more stories to tell, soft ones, strong ones, real ones. Just like this.